All right, so like everyone listening probably knows there are tons of language learning apps out there, right?
Yeah, just a ridiculous number.
It can be so overwhelming to even like try and figure out where to start.
Absolutely. I mean, how do you even begin to choose?
That's why we're here today for this deep dive.
To like cut through the
We'll like
noise.
cut through the noise.
Exactly.
Yep.
We're going to take a look at 5 of the most popular
The
apps.
heavy hitters,
Yeah. And we'll break down what makes each one unique.
their strengths, their weaknesses.
Help you figure out which one might be your perfect match.
So you can finally start like actually making progress towards your language goals.
Exactly. So are you ready to dive in?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about the one that everyone's probably at least heard of.
Yeah, the one that's basically taken over the world.
Duolingo.
Duolingo, exactly.
I mean, it's free, it's fun, it's super addictive.
You really know how to hook you in.
Like those little owls are everywhere.
Yeah, you can't escape them.
But like, does all that fun actually lead to real learning?
It's the big question, right? Can Duolingo really take you all the way to fluency?
Or is it more like just a good starting point?
Yeah, I mean, I've used it myself.
Me too.
And it's definitely great for like picking up some basic vocab and grammar.
Yeah, you can definitely get a foundation with Duolingo.
But I'm not sure I'd feel confident like having a full-on conversation after just using Duolingo.
Right, it's probably not enough to get you to like total fluency.
Especially if you're aiming for like a really high level of proficiency.
Yeah, if you want to be able to like read novels or write academic papers in your target language.
Duolingo alone probably isn't going to cut it.
You'll need to supplement with other resources for sure.
But for beginners or people who just want to like dip their toes into a new language.
It's a really good option.
Totally. And the fact that it's free is huge.
Yeah, that makes it super accessible.
Although those ads can be a bit annoying.
Oh yeah, they can be a bit much sometimes.
It's like you're trying to focus on conjugating verbs and then suddenly...
A giant owl pops up on your screen trying to sell you something.
Exactly. It's like, come on, I'm trying to learn here.
But hey, at least they offer a huge variety of languages.
Yeah, like over 40, right?
Something like that.
Even some less commonly taught ones.
So that's definitely a plus.
Okay, so we've covered the free and fun option.
The gateway drug of language learning.
Now let's talk about an app that's a bit more serious.
A bit more focused.
Babbel.
Yeah, Babbel's all about getting you speaking right from the start.
Like having actual conversation.
Exactly. They really emphasize practical communication skills.
So it's less about like memorizing grammar rules and more about actually using the language.
In real-world situations.
Which is ultimately what most language learners want, right?
I mean, that's the whole point.
To be able to talk to people.
To connect with other cultures.
Travel the world without feeling like you're stuck in a bubble.
Exactly. So Babbel tries to like bridge that gap.
Between textbook learning and real-life fluency.
And they do it through these personalized lessons and interactive exercises.
So it's not just you like passively listening to audio recordings.
You're actively participating.
You're speaking, you're writing, you're getting feedback.
And it's all tailored to your specific level and needs.
Which is pretty cool.
It's like having a personal tutor.
But unlike a human tutor, Babbel is available 24/7.
And it fits right in your pocket.
Right, but there's a catch.
Yeah, Babbel isn't free.
It's a subscription-based app.
So that's something to keep in mind.
You'll need to decide if those monthly fees are worth it for you.
Especially since their language selection isn't quite as extensive as Duolingo's.
Right, they focus more on quality over quantity.
Yeah, they want to make sure they're offering like really in-depth and effective courses.
Okay, so we got the fun and free option and the more structured conversational option.
Now, let's talk about the OG of language learning apps.
The one that's been around forever.
Rosetta Stone.
Yeah, Rosetta Stone's like the veteran of the language learning scene.
They've been doing this for decades.
And they have a very unique approach.
Like, they're not afraid to throw you in the deep end.
Yeah, they kind of just like immerse you in the language from the get-go.
No hand-holding, no translations.
It's like sink or swim.
Which can be pretty intimidating for some people.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But for others, it can be really effective.
Yeah, it forces you to think in the new language from the start.
Instead of relying on your native tongue as a crutch.
So you're learning more intuitively.
Like how children learn their first language.
Through exposure and repetition.
Exactly, and Rosetta Stone has actually gotten a lot better over the years.
Yeah, they've added more guidance and support.
So it's not quite as hardcore as it used to be.
But it's still a pretty immersive experience.
And it can be a really powerful way to learn if you're the type of person who thrives on that kind of challenge.
But of course, it's not for everyone.
And it's also one of the pricier options out there.
So you'll need to weigh the cost against the potential benefits.
And also consider their customer service.
Which hasn't always had the best reputation.
Yeah, there have been some complaints about that.
So just something to keep in mind.
Okay, so we've talked about Duolingo, Babbel, and Rosetta Stone.
Three very different approaches to language learning.
Now let's move on to an app that's all about community and real-world practice.
Busuu.
Yeah, Busuu's like the social butterfly of language learning apps.
They really emphasize connecting with native speakers,
Getting feedback from real people.
which can be so valuable for building confidence and fluency.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it.
When you're learning a language in isolation,
It's easy to get stuck in your own head.
you start to overthink things.
You're not sure if you're pronouncing things correctly.
You're hesitant to speak because you're afraid of making mistakes.
But when you have the opportunity to interact with native speakers,
It just like breaks down those barriers.
you realize that it's okay to make mistakes.
That everyone starts at the beginning.
And that the most important thing is just to communicate.
And Busuu makes it so easy to connect with native speakers.
They have this built-in feature where you can submit writing exercises.
Get feedback on your pronunciation.
Even have like little conversations.
It's pretty awesome.
And it really helps to like accelerate your learning.
But of course there's a catch.
Yeah, there's always a catch.
The amount of free content on Busuu is limited.
To unlock all the good stuff you need to subscribe.
So that's something to keep in mind.
Okay, so we got Duolingo, Babbel, Rosetta Stone, and Busuu.
4 down, 1 to go.
Let's wrap up this first round with memrise.
Memrise, the app that's all about making words stick.
Yeah, they use these clever little memory tricks called mnemonics.
Mnemonics. I love mnemonics.
They're basically like mental shortcuts.
That help you remember information more easily?
And memrise has really mastered the art of using mnemonics for language learning.
Yeah, they come up with these like really creative and often hilarious ways to connect words with images and stories.
Which makes them so much more memorable.
Absolutely. It's like if you're trying to learn the Spanish word for cat, which is gato,
Memrise might show you a picture of a cat wearing a hat.
like a gat hat.
Exactly.
It's silly, but it works.
Because it creates this like vivid and unusual association in your mind.
And that makes it way more likely that you'll actually remember the word.
And memrise also incorporates videos of native speakers into their lessons.
Which is great for getting exposure to authentic pronunciation and cultural context.
Yeah, you can see how the language is actually used in real life.
But some people find Memrise's approach to be a bit repetitive,
Yeah, it can feel a bit monotonous after a while.
especially if you're the type of learner who thrives on variety.
And they don't focus as much on grammar as some of the other apps.
So if you're looking for like really in-depth grammatical explanations.
You might need to supplement memrise with other resources,
But overall, it's a really solid app.
especially if you're a visual learner.
Or if you just like having fun while you learn.
Okay, so there you have it.
Our first 5 contenders in the language learning app arena.
Each one with its own unique strengths and weaknesses.
But we've only just scratched the surface.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll dig deeper into their teaching methodologies
See what the research says about their effectiveness.
and help you decide which one might be the key to unlocking your language learning success. So stay tuned.
We'll be right back after a short break.
Okay, so we've talked about like the overall vibe of these apps,
Yeah, like their personalities,
Exactly. But now let's get down to like the nitty-gritty.
the actual teaching methods.
Yeah, how do these apps actually help you learn a new language?
So let's start with Duolingo again.
The reigning champ of language learning apps.
We talked about how it's super gamified, but like, does that actually work?
Is it all just fun and games, or is there some real learning happening?
Yeah, because I mean, I know I get sucked into those streaks and leaderboards.
Oh yeah, me too.
But am I actually learning anything, or am I just like chasing points?
Well, it turns out there's actually a lot of science behind gamification and learning.
Really?
Yeah, our brains are wired to respond to rewards and challenges.
So like when you get that little dopamine hit from completing a lesson,
Or beating your friend's score.
it reinforces the learning process. Exactly. It makes you want to keep going.
So it's like tapping into our natural instincts.
But in a way that's actually beneficial for learning.
I can see that.
And Duolingo does a really good job of like balancing the fun with the educational content.
Yeah, they managed to make it engaging without being too silly.
Although I do sometimes wish they'd go a little deeper with the explanations.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm just memorizing phrases without really understanding the why behind them.
Right, like I want to know the grammar rules, not just the patterns.
Exactly.
But I guess for beginners, that level of detail might be overwhelming.
Yeah, they probably want to keep it simple and accessible.
And then as you progress, you can always supplement with other resources.
Like textbooks or grammar websites.
Exactly.
Okay, so Duolingo, good for getting started. Maybe not so much for reaching advanced fluency.
Right.
What about Babbel? How does their teaching method compare?
Well, Babbel is much more focused on conversational fluency.
Yeah, they really want to get you speaking from day one. Exactly. And they do that through these really well-structured lessons.
Yeah, their lessons are definitely more in-depth than Duolingo's.
They cover a lot of ground,
And they really emphasize real-world scenarios.
like ordering food at a restaurant or asking for directions.
So you're learning the language in a context that's actually useful.
Yeah, their interactive exercises are really good too.
Yeah. They make you think, and they force you to actually use the language.
Not just passively listen to it.
But I do find that Babbel can be a bit slow-paced sometimes.
Yeah, if you're already familiar with some of the basics.
You might find yourself getting a bit bored.
But for beginners, I think it's a really good pace.
Yeah, it gives you time to really absorb the material.
Okay, so Duolingo is gamified. Babbel is structured. What about Rosetta Stone?
Ah, Rosetta Stone, the immersion method.
Yeah, they just like throw you right in the deep end.
No floaties?
Sink or swim.
Which can be either exhilarating or terrifying depending on your personality.
Totally.
But there's definitely something to be said for that kind of immersive approach.
It forces you to think in the new language.
Instead of constantly translating back and forth in your head.
But it can be really effective for some people.
Yeah, I know some people who swear by Rosetta Stone.
But for others, it's just too much too fast.
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming if you're not used to that kind of learning style.
And it's definitely not the most fun app to use.
It's very serious.
Very academic.
But if you're looking for a challenge,
And you're willing to put in the effort.
Rosetta Stone could be a good option.
Okay, so we've got gamified, structured, immersive. What about busuu?
Busuu, the social learner.
Yeah, they're all about community and real-world practice.
Connecting with native speakers, getting feedback on your pronunciation.
Which is so valuable.
I mean, you can learn all the grammar rules in the world.
But if you can't actually speak the language.
What's the point?
Exactly. And busuu really helps you bridge that gap.
Between textbook learning and real-life communication.
Their lessons are good too.
Yeah, they're well-structured and they cover a lot of ground.
But the real highlight is the community aspect.
Being able to connect with other learners.
Get feedback from native speakers.
It just makes the whole learning process so much more engaging and rewarding.
But of course, you do need to be comfortable with putting yourself out there.
Yeah, if you're shy about speaking a new language,
busuu might not be the best fit.
but if you're looking for that extra push,
That accountability and support.
Busuu could be a game changer.
Okay, so we've got gamified, structured, immersive, social role. What about memrise?
Memrise the mnemonic master.
Yeah, they're all about those memory tricks.
Those little hacks that help you remember information more easily.
And they do a real good job of it.
Their mnemonics are so creative and often hilarious.
It's like they have a whole team of comedy writers working for them.
I know, right?
And it really works.
Yeah, I find myself remembering words that I learned on Memrise months later.
Just because of the mnemonic?
It's amazing.
But memrise isn't just about mnemonics.
Yeah, they also have really good videos of native speakers.
Which is great for picking up on pronunciation and cultural nuances.
But some people find their approach to be a bit repetitive.
Yeah, it can feel a bit like drilling sometimes.
And they don't focus as much on grammar as some of the other apps.
So if you're a grammar nerd,
Memrise might not be the best fit.
but if you're looking for a fun and effective way to learn vocabulary,
And you appreciate a good mnemonic.
memrise is definitely worth checking out.
Okay, so we've talked about how these apps approach teaching.
Now let's talk about the overall learning experience.
Okay, so we've talked about like the brains of these apps. You know how they approach teaching?
Yeah, and their personalities, kind of.
But what about like the actual learning experience?
Right, like what's it like to use these apps day to day?
Yeah, are they user-friendly? Are they engaging?
Do they keep you motivated or do they make you want to like throw your phone across the room?
Exactly. So let's start with like the overall design and functionality.
Yeah, like are the apps easy to navigate?
Is the interface intuitive?
Can you find what you're looking for without getting lost in a maze of menus?
Right, because nobody wants to waste time like fumbling around trying to figure out how an app works.
Especially when you're trying to learn a new language.
You've got enough on your plate already.
Exactly. So, in my experience, most of these apps do a pretty good job on the design front.
Yeah, they're all pretty sleek and modern.
They've clearly put a lot of thought into the user experience.
But there are some subtle differences.
Yeah, like Duolingo is definitely the most gamified,
Lots of bright colors and animations.
which can be fun and motivating.
But it can also be a bit distracting.
Yeah, if you're easily overwhelmed by visual stimuli.
Duolingo might not be the best choice.
Babbel, on the other hand, is a bit more minimalist,
Yeah, their design is very clean and uncluttered.
which I appreciate.
It's like very calming and focused.
Rosetta Stone is kind of in between,
Yeah, they've got some visuals.
but they're not as in-your-face as Duolingo.
And their interface is pretty straightforward.
Busuu is similar to Babbel.
Very clean and user-friendly.
And Memrise is kind of its own thing,
Yeah, they've got this like quirky and playful aesthetic.
which I personally really like.
It's like very different from the other apps.
But it definitely won't appeal to everyone.
Okay, so design and functionality are important.
But what about features?
Like what kind of tools and resources do these apps offer to support your learning?
Well, they all have the basics.
Progress trackers, vocabulary, lists, grammar explanations.
Interactive exercises, quizzes.
But some of them go above and beyond.
Yeah, like Babbel, for example, has these really cool cultural insights sprinkled throughout their lessons.
Oh, yeah, I love those.
They give you like little snippets of information about the culture and customs of the country where the language is spoken.
Which is so important.
It's not just about learning the words.
It's about understanding the people and the culture behind them.
Exactly. And Memrise has these fantastic videos of native speakers.
Yeah, they're so good for picking up on pronunciation and like those subtle nuances of communication.
Right, like how people actually use the language in real life.
And Duolingo has this really cool feature called stories.
Oh yeah, those are fun.
They're like these little interactive stories that you can read or listen to.
And they help you practice your comprehension skills.
And they're actually really engaging.
Yeah, I find myself getting sucked into them.
Okay, so features are important, but let's talk about something that's probably on everyone's mind.
Price.
Yeah, because let's face it.
Not all of us have unlimited budgets for language learning apps.
So can you give us a quick rundown of the cost options for each of these apps?
Sure. So Duolingo, as we mentioned before, is free.
But they do have a premium version.
That gets rid of the ads and unlocks some additional features.
Babbel, Rosetta Stone, and busuu are all subscription-based.
With varying price points depending on the length of the subscription and the features you want.
And Memrise also has a free version.
And a pro version with more features.
So there's really an option for every budget.
But of course, price isn't the only factor to consider.
You also need to think about your individual learning style.
Your goals.
Yeah.
Your motivation.
And ultimately, what you're hoping to get out of the experience.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
because the best language learning app
Is the one that works for you.
the one that you actually enjoy using.
The one that helps you make real progress towards your goals.
So don't be afraid to experiment.
Try out a few different apps.
See what clicks.
And most importantly,
have fun.
because learning a new language should be a joyful experience.
Not a chore.
And on that note,
I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
wow, that was a lot of information.
We covered a lot of ground.
But hopefully it was helpful.
Yeah. Hopefully our listeners feel more equipped to choose the right language learning app for them.
And if you're still feeling lost or overwhelmed,